Great day. Happy Friday. Let me kick things off. I'm going to go over a few slides with you to kick things off regarding SCORE, and then I will kick off the topic for us. Number one, we want to talk about SCORE with you. Hopefully some of you have been through, I know some of you have been through our forums and live streams. Some of you have mentors at SCORE. I sort of see the names on the webinar. But for those of you that aren't involved in SCORE, we are a nationwide organization, and we're a partner of the US SBA Small Business Administration. And we provide two main categories of services. One is confidential business mentoring, whether it's in person and online, and we switch exclusively to online during COVID. We're sort of still being careful, but we are, either way, we're there for the clients. And then things like this, the business education services. We've got a lot of recordings, online classes, and live streams that you can join. And then we have over 300 chapters at SCORE, 11,000 or more volunteers in 1,500 communities. So here's the great thing is we have helped 10 million small businesses in the country. And as you've heard, and most of you are entrepreneurs, you are the backbone of the business in this country. And we are happy to have helped that cause. Where SCORE can help you is in all phases of the life cycle of the business. It can be pre-startup, startup phase when you're opening. That's where we do a lot of our work to make sure that the business is ready for success, and then everything is done in order to be successful before the business kicks off. Then when you're in business, we actually have a lot of long-term clients that work with their mentor for years and years through the growth. And then if the business does not work out, how do you sell or close or exit the business? So we're involved in all aspects of that. We're fortunate to have a variety of excellent sponsors and community partners. I can tell you, I saw firsthand last year how some of our, for example, our banking partners stepped up to help with the CARES Act, with loans and grants, which was, I probably don't have to tell you, was a very confusing process, particularly at the beginning. So we are fortunate to have these community partners and sponsors that work with us. They educate our mentors behind the scenes. Then when the time comes, we can pull them in to work directly with our clients. We are also very proud that we were recognized as a Diamond chapter last year, and very, very proud of it. And we continue to do what needs to be done to help the business community in Sarasota and Manatee counties. So let's get down to today's topic. So before I do that, actually, let me do some housekeeping, go over some housekeeping items. Number one, this is set up as a webinar, which I know by now we're all Zoom experts, even grandfathers or grandmothers are Zoom experts. But anyway, this is a webinar. That means the presenters can speak openly and freely. The attendees will have to be enabled for speaking, which I would love to do when the time comes. And in order to do that, when you want to speak, is you use the raise hand function, and then I will enable your microphone, and then you will unmute and you ask your question or you share your feedback. Forums are set up in two different sections. What we're going to do is we're going to have one short 15 to 20-minute presentation for you, and then we're going to open it up to discussion and questions. So please, as we're going through, please jot down your questions or anything you want to share from a personal perspective, how this topic has impacted you or what you can add. While we have great experts here in terms of security, cybersecurity and technology, you might have been impacted, or you might have resolved an issue, that a real life issue you can share with us. So we'll have the first section, a first Q&A, and then we'll go into a second section, and sort of dig a little deeper into the topics. And we'll have another Q&A session. So I urge you to keep in mind your questions or write them down. I'm not good at remembering things, so I always write things down and then ask them. We're looking for a very interactive discussion with you. So I talked about the raise hand function when you want to speak. As the presenters are going through, I'll probably ask you to hold off until we get to the Q&A section. We will send you a copy of this presentation afterwards, along with a survey. So if you don't want to take notes, you don't have to, you'll have it. You'll also see some reference material here that you can click on. So those links will be live, and you can, when you get a copy, you can leverage that material. And we will record the session, and you can watch it later if you so desire. So we are delighted today to pick up on another topic that's of tremendous need and attention, and that's cybersecurity and technology. We're all in one way or the other impacted by cybersecurity, because if you are involved, if you use technology, you are impacted in one way, one form or another. Some of us may not recognize it, that we're getting attacked and phished and etc. But we are at the forefront, and so we're excited to present this to you and hope that you pick up a few, even if it's a few small nuggets for your business. So we know that businesses require technology to succeed, and when you have technology, you have cyber risk. So we're hopeful that we can do some good education today on that. Today's takeaways. So as I've sort of alluded to a couple of times, take steps to minimize the risk of cyber attacks. Realize the value and understand the risk of using technology. I think we do inherently, but just really take a step back in the next hour and think about that. Make smarter decisions about technology, and then think strategically when using technology. We know we need technology, but it's, what are the steps we take in rolling out that strategy for our business? Today, I want to introduce my co-presenters. So first of all, I am the moderator, Ramin Hashemi. I am a mentor at SCORE Minnesota and have been with the organization for, I would say, a couple of years. Mehrdad Shabastari is a panelist, and he runs actually the SCORE chapter in Southeast Minnesota. And Devin McSweeney is a panelist, and he is a cybersecurity expert with a lot of hands-on experience. So between these two great experts, I would say bring on your tough questions. They're ready. And it's been a pleasure working with them to prepare today. So at this point, let me turn it over to Mehrdad to cover for us the fundamentals of cybersecurity.
Thank you, Ramin. You really set the bar high. I was like, I think I'm gonna bail out. No.
No, sir.
Thank you for that introduction. And thank you all for showing interest in this topic. As Ramin mentioned, yes, this is it should be, if it's not already, obviously, if those of us are here, it's an interesting subject, and it should be really interesting to many of us. If we work with electronics, with technology, we should be interested in this subject. So go ahead. And Ramin also, in the takeaways he mentioned, I'm going to summarize that. My kind of both metaphorical and rhetorical and also practical examination of technology is when you're working with technology, and who doesn't? Again, one of the topics that Ramin mentioned, who doesn't work with technology? Even panhandlers in the street, they use technology these days. So if you're using technology, ask the question, why am I using technology? What's going to be the risk? How much risk am I willing to take? And what cost am I willing to pay? Because just like any tool, whether it's power tool, whether it's technology tool, as soon as you pick it up, it's going to be a cost, and there's going to be a risk, whether you cut your finger, whether you get hacked. So you're going to need to be aware, and you need to have an appetite to take on that risk. So we're gonna talk about this fundamental statement here pretty much throughout the presentation. Go ahead. So when it comes to cybersecurity and cyber attacks, so cybersecurity, for those of us who may not really know what cybersecurity, so the concept of cybersecurity is the notion, it might be a little new, but it's really not. You know, it's even going back to the 70s and late 60s and 70s when computers were fairly novel. The hacking was happening, it just wasn't as prevalent as what we know today. It was just very, very scarce that somebody would want to do something. The idea of internet that we know today, it was not designed with the security that we know today, because the internet was designed as a playground for everybody to share information and basically be the utopia. The people who invented the internet, they had their vision, their idea wasn't about bad people, bad guys, and malicious people being out there and trying to hurt others. It just wasn't one of those things. So unfortunately, here we are, and we need to protect ourselves as long as we play in the field. And when it comes to protecting ourselves, there are really 4 elements that we need to keep in mind. And these are, we will touch on these throughout the presentation in some shape or form. Obviously, you need to have the proper tools. Again, when you're working with power tools, you need to have your gloves, you need to have your goggles, same thing. When you're working with, especially when we're talking in a small business, and we know small businesses are vulnerable these days, even so than a few years ago. So we need to have proper tools to protect us. We need to have right policies and procedures in place. And for a small business, policies may not make a whole lot of sense because, as we know, by the way, I am an owner of a small business, so I know you're not going to go and write a 6-page document as a policy for your business to protect it. But it comes down to disciplines. Even if you are a sole proprietorship or you have 1 or 10 employees, you need to establish some habits, good habits and disciplines, and make sure your people, your employees, are up to speed with those habits, which takes us to the next element, which is about human. And it's about human psychology, it's about human behavior. So if you have, again, even if it's you yourself and you have employees, you want to make sure first you follow those right disciplines and good behaviors, best practices, and also encourage and enforce those practices among your employees. And the last one is the physical security. This may apply in some situation and perhaps not in others. So if you have a shop, you want to make sure your cash register is safe, your computers are safe. Nowadays, a lot of businesses are run virtually. So, and there are proper locks and safes for that as well. Go ahead. And as I mentioned briefly, a lot of small businesses are being attacked these days, mainly because bad guys are realizing that big corporations, although they are getting attacked, they're not prone by any means. But the bad guys are realizing that big corporations, big organizations, they have the tools, they have the money, they invest in the cyber defense, and they hire the people, whereas small businesses may not necessarily have all those resources, may not have the dollars to go and spend and buy all these fancy tools and protective gears and whatnot. So small businesses are becoming the low-hanging fruit for these guys, and they know there is money to be made. So just realize cyber attack and cyber hacking and all these malicious activities, they're no longer just a high school kid waking up one day deciding, you know what, I'm going to go and have some fun just for the sake of it. These are paid individuals. There are corporations behind these activities, and they make big buck. They are organizations. They make huge revenues. So they are organized activities. And I know this is a little sobering, but it is true, it is real. About close to 45% of small businesses have suffered some shape or form of cyber attack in the past year, year and a half. And vast majority of these attacks start with simple, silly email. It doesn't happen with sophisticated thing. It just is a simple email, and simple clicking can start the ripple effect, can start the domino. And the average cost, as you may see on the screen, you may be asking, hey, Mehrdad, my business is not even worth $200,000. How could I sustain? How could I take a damage of up to 200,000? But as we'll talk about, there are, again, ripple effect that these costs will add up. Is not just one thing or another, but a chain of events and different activities that add up to this cost, contribute to this cost. And in some cases, yes, businesses do go out because of these, because they cannot sustain those attacks and deal with them properly, and they end up basically going out of business. Go ahead. So what makes up that $200,000? Roughly, this is obviously, it's not a science, but average, we're talking about $200,000 damage caused to small businesses. So some of the contributing factors are basically business losing its reputation. Once, as we know, the power of social media and networking and all that, once two people experience that, Joe's business lost my information to cyber hackers, and then the word just propagates, and next thing you know, nobody's coming your way, nobody's coming to your business because the word is spread. Then, if you lose sensitive data, depending on the type of business you're running, if you sustain the damage to customer data, that is another point of vulnerability, meaning now you've put customers, you've put users at risk by exposing, unintentionally, of course, nobody does anything in this situation, nobody exposes user data intentionally, but somehow during this unfortunate activity, your business exposed customer data, and that can perpetuate into the last item on the list, which is about legal action. So a lot of companies, as we know, they get sued because customer data has been exposed because of lack of proper safety procedures in place. Of course, the financial damage is all over the board, whether it's losing customer and losing reputation, attempting to recover from that loss. All that is, comes down to financial loss. And if you're dealing with regulatory issues, if you need to comply with certain government regulations, then you're talking about financial penalties that the government, the big brother, may be posing on you because of that loss. And disruption, and the list, this is just a sample, but you can imagine this list can grow easily. So there are a number of elements that contribute to that loss factor. That's why we're encouraging, and we're really big on do what you can to protect that precious small business of yours, because I really think it's a matter of when, not so much if, when every small business is going to get hit. It is, again, back to the initial statement. How much are you willing to sustain? How much damage are you willing to take? And how much risk appetite do we have for that? Go ahead. This gets into a little bit of a technicality, and the reason is, again, using a different analogy, if you're driving a car, if you're a car owner, you don't necessarily need to know all the ins and outs of the engine, but at least you got to know, okay, where do I pour oil into my engine? You don't take an oil can and put it in the gas tank. So you just got to know, well, it helps to know, not gotta, but helps to know what are the different types of attacks, what are the different types of activities. All viruses, a spyware, ransom, adware, and this is just a sample. There's just a slew of terminologies that you may hear. They all fall under, really, what's known as malware. And malware is really nothing more than a intentionally badly designed software, computer software. And each one serves slightly different purpose. The end goal is to hurt somebody physically or digitally and take some money away, make some money along the way. So what viruses do, they're, again, malicious piece of computer software, sit on the computer, sit on the electronic device, and cause damage to other programs. They basically read other programs, and they cause damage to other software, to other programs, with the intention of either just damaging the physical device and doing other things. Spyware, as the may apply, it sits on your computer, on your device, and kind of reconnaissance, and listens to your digital and electronic activities and tries to capture behavior of the user, so to capitalize on those behaviors. Whether you're a shopper, whether you're a small business owner, whatever the case might be, the spyware watches the behavior and builds a profile of that activity. The most dangerous one is the ransomware that has been happening more and more these days, or these years rather, which is kind of a combination of all of these. It's a badly written, maliciously written piece of software, listens to activities, captures your behavior, builds a profile, and then goes to work. It takes your files, puts a lock on it, encrypts it, and Devin is going to talk a little bit about what that means. Puts a lock on your files and takes it away. So now you, the owner of that file, have no access to your files. So you've lost your files basically to someone else. You've lost the house key to someone else, and now that someone else is asking for a ransomware. Basically asking you, hey, you want your house keys back? You're gonna have to pay me, certain amount of money. So that's really the worst case scenario that really no business owner, no individual wants to be in that situation. Go ahead. Getting a little bit more detail about, we talked about, more than 90% of these attacks and activities come through email. And what you might have heard along the way in different venues, different situations, phishing. What is phishing? Phishing is, you get a piece of email asking you, back about 10, 15 years ago, it used to be the Nigerian artist asking for, hey, we got a great piece of property, come and own it for peanuts. And a lot of people actually fell for it. Nowadays, could be, hey, do you need a, I don't know, do you need a vaccine? We'll give it to you for free. It just depends on the trend, social trends, daily trends, and societal trends. So phishing, basically an email that goes to a mass population with no specification, with no individualization. And typically these come in the form of, hey, sir, hey, madam, dear user, dear customer. There's no individualization to it. And that should be a real, the first flag. When an email starts, dear sir, dear whatever, but there's no name, their own identified individual. So you got to pay attention to those emails. The next level is spear phishing. These are, again, bad emails, emails coming through with typically with links that take you somewhere, that ask you to click on something. But now you've got a little bit more individualization. They call you by name. Hey, Mr. Shabasteri, we've got a great deal for you. How about this brand new car for 20 bucks? Something like that. Or even more creative, people targeting individuals with the spear phishing, they know a little bit about your personal life. They know, for instance, where you work, what you do, your coworkers, perhaps even your children's name. So they try to get to know you, and they really hone in on some of the things that matter to the individual. So those get a little bit tricky to identify, because when you open the email, hey, Raman, how's the day? I know you've been driving this, nice Mercedes, and we've got a really cool, warranty for you. You just click here, and we can safeguard your beautiful Mercedes at no cost. So, and Raman, being a smart guy, says, yeah, delete. And then the next one is going after big guys. We're talking about, CEOs, CIOs, people that play big roles in organizations, and that's whaling, because the bad guys know these big guys are in control. They have access to a good chunk of money or authority or something of that magnitude. And in fact, you might have heard of the Terry Sumner back in, I believe it was in Obama years. His email got exposed and just started the whole chain of events. And that started with a simple phishing email, that some bad email came through. And what's really surprising that, big guys and corporations, they pay really little attention to these emails, which means they don't go through these courses that we offer here about cybersecurity, how to be aware. So we're trying to educate them as well. Go ahead. So all these phishing, spear phishing, whaling, it really comes down to social engineering. We talked a little bit about, these bad guys knowing a thing or two about individuals. And that's really the big part of it. These bad guys spend quite a bit of time researching individuals if they want to attack, if they want to target people individually, in terms of whaling and individualizing the messages. They get to know their target fairly well. They get to know their habits. They get to know, how many times a day they go to Starbucks or to a specific coffee shop, how much time they spend here. So they really follow you. So the point is, be aware. And of course, a lot of these activities happen online these days. Nobody really puts on the, proverbial hat and the raincoat and follow you around physically, but this happens online. And who is not online these days? Very few of us. It's just a matter of how much time you spend online and what kind of activities do you engage online. If you're a constant, social media user, you really want to be aware of where you go, with whom you interact. There are a lot of interactions happen online, and all these are connected to one another. Every connection, every contact that you make has got contacts to at least 2 or 3, perhaps 10 other people, and it's just a network. So you want to know who your contacts are. And the biggest element in this whole social engineering factor is being aware of one's emotions. When you get that email that says, hey, Mr. Josephson, here's a great deal for you. Before you click on that, really take 2 seconds. It takes no more than just a few seconds. What is this email about? Why am I being sent? Why is this email coming my way? What have I got to do with this email? A lot of people don't take that few seconds because of impulse. So they see a really nice looking email, really, appealing, and there goes the click. Next thing you know, either the computer goes boom, or it takes a few days for the computer to go boom. But it will at some point go, not with a real boom, but you know what I mean. It just happens. So you really want to be aware of your emotions. If you're upset and you're looking at that email, stay away from it. If you're happy, you want to be very careful. So just kind of do a little bit of a check and balance when reading emails that are out of place. Okay.
Mehtar, I'm doing a time check. I know we've got 3 more slides in your section. If you could wrap them up so we have more time for Q&A, that would be great.
Yep, no problem. So there are a number of good practices we offer, and we highly encourage people to do, especially in the small business setting. Make sure your computer is up to date. You know, those patches and upgrades, they are for a good reason. Make sure those are up to date. Make sure you have an antivirus program. Again, it just depends on the degree of how much you use the computer for what purpose. Make sure you have a backup of especially of your business data. So when that ransomware happens, you have a good copy that you can restore. Make sure you use a VPN. And we'll get into that a little bit, what VPN is for those of us who may not necessarily know. It's just, creates a private tunnel so your communication is secure. And if you have questions about any of these, of course, you can reach out to any of us afterward. Go ahead. Other practices, some of these are a little bit more nuisance, but they are very effective. Make sure you don't use the same privilege on your computer as an administration that you would typically. I know a lot of people just log into the computer as an administrator, and that really is dangerous. Some computers, some operating systems take care of that by default. Windows is not very good at that. Remove software that if you haven't used a software in, let's say, anywhere from 3 to 6 months, it's probably a good time to just get rid of it, because if you don't use the software, it probably doesn't get updated, and that creates an open door for those vulnerabilities and attacks. Using a two-factor authentication, making sure, basically proving when you log into a site, telling the site using 2 different methods who you really are. Email is very ill way of proving who you are. Email can easily be hacked, and it's not a good way of telling that site who you really are. So use two-factor authentication using your phone, or some other methods, even better than phone, that we'll talk about briefly. And turning off Bluetooth, and this is another one of those nuisance probably. Who's gonna go turn off Bluetooth feature, who doesn't use? But there are some cases that you just go to an area that you just don't need Bluetooth, turn it off. And then, of course, using strong, really good password with Password Manager. Here we talk about some of the tools and technologies that are available really for free, and there are no gimmicks attached to them. They just are that. They are free, and there are some other technologies that are worth paying a little bit of money and protecting your device, your business. Authy at the lower left corner of the screen, it's one of the methods that, as part of the multi-factor authentication, along with Google Authenticator, Microsoft also has got its own tool. That's something you may want to consider in addition to using an email or some login credentials. KeePass on the upper left corner is one of the tools that's completely free, and I actually personally have been using it for close to 10 years. I haven't had any issues with it, and I'm not endorsing or recommending anything. These are just experiences that I'm sharing. On the right section of the screen, you're looking at some of the antivirus products. Almost all these vendors and suppliers offer free version. You just have to be aware how much ad you want to tolerate. Some of them come with some ads, ads pop up on your screen. And if you don't want to do that, that's totally understandable. And some of them are fairly inexpensive, anywhere from $20, $30 a month, but it just might be worth the investment to protect your business. That's really what I have to share, and we'll have the open for discussion and questions.
Thank you, Mehrdad. I know that's a lot of content, but I appreciate you covering that swiftly. So, folks, if you have a question or a comment, please use the raise hand function while I recap. So I'm going to look at the screen and see who wants to speak up. But in the meantime, I appreciate Mehrdad covering kind of recognizing the risks of technology. I like the power tool analogy. Really, the safety goggles and everything else you have to do. That's the price we pay for using technology. We have to be aware of the risks. There's a great education on the technical, procedural, human, and physical aspects that we have to look out for. $200,000 average price tag. I know that number is a rough number, but that's a lot of money you have to spend, and that's an average. It could that could impact you. Really, I know that you've said it many times, but many of these attacks start with email, and it just, I can personally tell you, I've won a lot of rewards from different stores in the last week, and I've been tempted. So I appreciate that you define malware types, so we're aware of them. Then you gave some common sense advice, the emotional aspect of things, how we handle emails, how we handle making sure that we apply patches, and then password management. So it's a lot of great things to talk about. So I see Monica has her hand up. So if you can unmute, you can ask your question or comment.
Hi, I've never heard of and so I don't understand what the two-factor multi-factor auto thing is. Do you just mean you're using two different securities to sign into your account? Could you explain that a little more?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. As are many questions. There are really no bad questions. But yeah, multi-factor authentication, it's not, well, let's just talk about what it is. So multi-factor authentication, when you log in, let's say, to your bank account, in addition to just using your user ID and password, your credentials to log in, immediately after clicking that sign in button, once you have enabled the right tools and whatnot, you get a, let's say in this case, you've installed that Authy or Google Authenticator, you get a pop-up on your mobile device, on your phone, with some number. And then your bank, the screen on your bank login will probably change to a different screen asking you to enter that number. So that's two way of proving who you are. So in case your password to the bank login page gets compromised by some malicious guy, then they will most likely not have access to your phone number, although there are ways of doing that, but very likely the bad guy will not have access to your phone line, so they will not have that code that you receive as part of that tool. So you log in, and then you're presented with a number with some phrase or something on your phone, which you need to turn around and provide that number to the web page, to the website, so to make sure you are who you say you are.
If I could jump in real quick to more generally define multi-factor authentication, it's split generally into three different sections. Something you know, which is a password. Something you are, which is like, your fingerprint or your retina scan. And something you have, that's like your phone that they can send a code to and say, verify the code on your phone. So there's three general groups that it can be: something you know, something you have, and something that you are. You as a person. Yeah. That's generally how it works. Picking two of those at least is a good way to increase security, because as Mehrdad said, a malicious hacker might be able to get your password from some other, hack that they did, but if they don't then have access to your phone or your fingerprint, then they have no way to actually access the data that they're trying to access.
Yeah, because now my second thing is I just got a email recently from, I have I think McAfee virus protection, that my phone number was found on the dark web. So, but they can't tell me where it was, and I don't know how to fix that. So,
yeah. I have McAfee. I can tell you, I know Devin and Mehrdad, I'm sure you guys have expert advice. As a user of McAfee, they do a good job telling you when your email / password, your phone number is exposed on the dark web. And I look at that as a warning. And sometimes they have concrete things you can do, such as changing your password. So Devin, I don't know, Mehrdad, if you have what advice you have for Monica.
Yeah, so when it comes to your phone number being found on the dark web, I think it's probably safe to say without going too much into detail about what the dark web is, that all of our phone numbers are already on the dark web somewhere. You know, them just having access to your phone number isn't necessarily bad by itself. If you get more of a notification like, hey, we found your, you know, you used your email, for example, on, you know, xyz.com, and xyz.com just recently got hacked. And you say, okay, so I have an account with this company that just got hacked. At that point, you may want to go in and consider changing your password for that company's website or something, because in addition to, you know, your email that was gathered, you don't know what other information they gathered. They may, you know, hopefully the xyz.com isn't storing your password, you know, just as clear text. Oh, technology words there. But typically, if you get a notification that your information was found on some website that got hacked, you'd probably want to change or rotate that information around using a strong password, like Mehrdad said. You don't want to use your dog's name or anything like that, because if somebody knows about your dog, you know, that's the first thing they're going to guess.
And
Okay,
Devin,
that's good advice, because yeah, I was part of, I think, the T-Mobile hack thing. So I should probably go change that password then.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
and if you use that password on multiple websites, the same passwords, that's why these experts are telling us not to use the same password over and over again, because now you have to go change it on other accounts as well.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so to play off of that, the whole concept of using the same password across multiple sites, I get it. Remembering many passwords is difficult, but that's where using a password manager like Mehrdad spoke about comes in handy. What a password manager does is you have the account with them, and you log in with a very, very secure master password. And my password manager's master password is like 35 characters long. And that's very, very difficult to sort of brute force hack into, you know, unless my master password is my dog's name 7 times in a row. With the password manager, you then, you know, for each website that you have, you say, okay, I want to create a secure password for my bank or for, you know, my insurance company or something like that. And the password manager can create different, unique, and algorithmically complex passwords like uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special symbols, very unique passwords for all of these different sites for you. So it does a couple different things. It reduces the likelihood that you're going to have a weak password, like, you know, a child's name or a dog's name or something on an important website. But B, it's also going to reduce the number of passwords you have to remember down to just the one master password. And you typically want this to be a very strong password, because if somebody gets into it, they have all your other passwords. But you know, passphrases are a big thing nowadays, and it's a big recommendation. And passphrases are essentially, you know, a sentence of a few words that's very easy for you to remember, and maybe capitalize every word or something. Because the more letters, numbers, symbols you put in a password, the more of those there are, like the length of the password, it's harder for somebody to actually hack and crack into.
Mm-hmm.
How do I find a password manager? Like what, on Google Play, or do you have some that you recommend?
So on the previous slide with all the tools and technologies, the top left of those are password managers. There's KeepPass, there's LastPass, stuff like that. Some of them have free versions. The paid ones allow you to use, for example, I personally use LastPass. There's a free version of it. But the paid version allows you to use the password manager across multiple devices. Like on my computer, I can have it, and on my phone, I can have it. So if I want to log into my bank from, you know, either device, I can use the same password manager for that.
And many of the antivirus programs these days come bundled with password manager. It just depends, I guess, what package you purchase. Some of them, I should say, some do have that as part of their package.
Okay, great. Thank you. This has helped me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Great question. I see a question from Christina. We are going to send the slides over afterwards. There's great, not only references, but also names of vendors and others that both Mehrdad and Devin had outlined here. So we will send that out right after. Any other questions from the audience before we move to the next section? Okay, Wanda, 1 second. And you can unmute and speak, Wanda.
I know that we didn't necessarily, we briefly touched on the VPNs, but I had the NordVPN, and every time it would like not really link. So I was exposed all the time. And so for me, it was a negative experience in a sense, because I did pay for the services for a 3-year plan thinking I'm going to be covered. And then it would never, whether I went to Canada, whether I did the US, different state, all these things, and it would just keep not really keeping, it would drop it, whatever. And so I don't know if there is another way that I can help my business having a VPN that actually works, number one, or two, it just gave me this feeling that I was paying for a service that really wasn't helping me, but so many people talk in favor of it. And then I was wondering, well, can the VPNs also be hacked?
So first of all, yes. Now the hackers are actually going after security companies. Just a few months ago, one of the big security companies got hacked, FireEye, I think it was. So really nowadays, nobody is secure. It's just a matter of, again, more than when rather than if. So yes, everybody can get hacked. It comes down to a little bit of a research. NordVPN used to be a very good product. In the last maybe few months that I've heard, they've kind of gone downhill a little bit for various reasons. Not every product stays on top all the time, just like many other things in life. And if you have a paid subscription, you really have the right to ask for the service. You know, contact them and say, you know what's going on? Why is the service not up to the standard that I was promised? And I would even go as far as asking for some damages. In terms of service not working, again, it goes back to the research part. When looking at your business, so, okay, I'm traveling. I'm going to travel as part of my business. Where are the areas that I need to have coverage? And making sure that coverage is part of the service offerings. So when you say it wasn't working, can you share a little bit more what specifically was not happening?
So it would tell you that you're protected now, like it'll give you this signal that now your search is protected, right? And then it would give me then shortly after, I don't know, 3 minutes later, that I was no longer protected, that I was off of the VPN, that I needed to like log in again or reconnect. I'm sorry, the word would be reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
So I got 3 minutes worth of VPN protection.
I think typically NordVPN's a big company. There's ExpressVPN. There's a lot of VPN companies, Fastlane, stuff like that. I think typically these services are sort of very available, and I personally use a VPN, and I personally haven't had issues like that. So typically they're very available. And so as Mehrdad mentioned, it is a service that you're paying for. It would be good to reach out to them and say, hey, why is this the case? Why is this not working? Let me talk to tech support. Or if you, the company, cannot get this working, I would like a refund back, and maybe go, find another VPN service. But VPNs are very well sort of established and widely used. And they're, that's not an issue of the concept of a VPN itself that's causing you to drop off. It's probably the servers, the server you were trying to connect to at that time was bogged down, or a lot of people were trying to use it, or it was shut off or something like that. But generally speaking, VPNs are like a well-established part of technology nowadays, and you should be able to find one that suits your needs.
Yeah, I agree, Devin. I think a lot of those issues come down to connectivity problems. They're really underlying issues that manifest themselves as a VPN, but that's...
Yeah, and if you're a traveler, I would typically, oftentimes these companies have locations of their servers published on their site or somewhere. And if that's not available, I would reach out to the company, somebody, try to find a live person, as difficult as it is these days, and tell them, this is the nature of my business. I need to have access in this and this and this countries. Is that available? And if they give you a wishy-washy answer, that should be a yellow flag. So yes, back to Devin's point, yes, those are basically, if the connection in that country or that particular region is weak, the connection to that server dropped, so that's why your VPN goes down. So there could be, again, could be a settings too. Could be a setting in the VPN on your computer and in correlation with the VPN service. Unfortunately, with technology, there is not a straight answer. It's just because these are custom tools. Every tool has its own switch and parameter and setting. So you need to, of course, be not yourself, but you need to work with people, especially if you're paying for a service. You need to get that service. You deserve to get somebody to look at that. Now, if you're picking up a free product, then of course the onus is on the user to figure out those details and parameters.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised, a lot of help out there. We can definitely point you in the right direction. Even with free products, there's good communities out there, because people want to help each other. So
yeah, all right. Well, I think that's good advice, and certainly reaching out to tech support is the right thing to do, Wanda. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. We have a question in the chat box from James. I don't know if you folks have seen it. It says, I'll read it. We have an Excel spreadsheet that's locked with a password. How secure is this being stored on a network drive?
So typically, I think it's James.
Yeah.
These passwords on Excel and Word documents, they're not really secure. The purpose of the password is if you have a specific information, if you have a formula in your Excel sheet, the idea is so for somebody else, another user, not to go in and change that formula and muck with it and change it for, whether intentionally or not. But it's not really meant to secure the document in its true security fashion. That is not the purpose. Those passwords can easily be broken because they don't have sophisticated algorithm behind them. They're very simple-minded, the nature of the password in that document. Usually it's like, 6 or 8 characters and straight words or numbers. It doesn't, unless you put in sophisticated phrase in there, but it has no check or balance. It's not going to come back saying, oh, your password is simple, you got to change it. And again, the idea is to protect the document from being altered, not so much to protect the document from hackers are going to crack that password in a matter of, I would say, 2 seconds, even if that long.
Yeah.
So if it's really that important of a document, you should look at another ways of protecting it. If you have financial data in that document, you should probably investigate some other options and store it in a secure location, like a backup. But that password in particular, it's really no guarantee that the document is not going to get hacked or tweaked. In terms of storing that on a network drive, again, the document, as long as, so it depends how wide the network is open. If it's just your home network, it's somewhat protected. Only your family members probably have access to it. If it's a organization network, then you're talking wider access. And if one of your employees, I'm not accusing anybody, but majority of attacks come from inside the organization, just because, curiosity and whatnot. So if your organization has people, technically savvy people, it's possible that somebody just wants to play and it will go and hack that document. So I would not put sensitive sensitive data in that Excel document. And if you really want to protect it, you probably want to look at something like a database that is well protected. So again, goes back to the context and contents. What is it that we're trying to protect? I know it's not really the answer perhaps you were looking for, James. And unfortunately, that's what technology, there is no cut through and here's the answer, boom, let's do it. Because these are all custom-made tools. So well, we're more than happy to follow up if you have any specifics that we need to look at. Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I see James says thank you. I don't know if you saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take one more question that's in the Q&A, and says, James O'Brien, will the National Institute of Standards of Technology, NIST, come out with more than one new form of quantum resistant encryption next year. So there's, I know Devin or Merdad, if we
So
can.
quantum computing is supposed to save our digital lives. We'll see how well that will work. But really, that's supposed to take care of a lot of the privacy and security issues.
Okay.
That's being worked on right now. It's showing some promises that we may not even need passwords. But again, it's not going to happen next year, not even next 5 years. By the time it reaches us, the average user, I want to bet 10 years by the time. Right now the quantum computing, it's really in labs and in really, really like, top 1 or 2 organizations are being experimented with. It's got really good promises, good future, but the expense side of it, that's why it's going to, just like anything in technology and in life for that matter, by the time it's down to consumer level, it needs to be mass produced. It needs to reach the economy of scale. So I really doubt we're going to see quantum computing down to our level in at least another 10 years, but I could be wrong.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's, these are great questions, and I was hoping for that. I think this is a great discussion and questions with our experts. So why don't we move to the next section? And I think we're going to hit some of what's on your mind. And Devin, unfortunately, we took a lot of time on questions, but hopefully you'll be able to cover this material.
Yeah, absolutely. Good day, everyone. I'm Dev McSweeney. I've worked in cybersecurity my entire professional life. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity, and I'm a certified ethical hacker, like Raman said. So first of all, I think it's important to note that every business is different, and different in the services they provide, different in the type of data they handle, and different in their clientele. There's no one-size-fits-all for cybersecurity in business, and security should be balanced against other aspects of technology in business. Now, I have this wonderful diagram here, and if you think of a triangle with security, functionality, and user-friendliness sort of on the points here, the closer you get to one of the points of the triangle, the farther you get from the other two. So you could hypothetically take your small business to the most secure and hardened state possible, but at the same time you're sacrificing how practically or easily your technology suits your business needs. And the same goes the other ways as well. If you get more user-friendliness, you get away from the security side of things. So it's very much a balancing act. And at the end of this section, I'll go over the cybersecurity lifecycle, sort of which determines what level of security that you need. So for this portion of the forum, I'm going to go through what I view as the 3 sort of potential vectors of attack. Raman, if you'd like to go to the next slide, against the business, which, as we can see here, are technology, the employees, and physical access. And Merdad went a little bit over, the categories like, procedural protections, training for employees and stuff like that. But I'm going to go over some examples of attacks against each of these attack vectors and how you can get your business into a sort of more secure state. So Merdad spoke briefly about the importance of updating your operating systems and software. And this page has a lot on it, but essentially this is a website in the top left you can see called Exploit Database, or Exploit DB. It was created for ethical hackers and security researchers, and it's essentially just a collection of known vulnerabilities in software of all shapes and sizes, like operating systems, applications and stuff like that. But you'll notice nothing is stopping the malicious hackers from using this information for nefarious purposes. So if you click on one of the entries in Exploit DB, you get much more detailed information. Now on this slide, we see in the title that this exploit is for the software called Apache Shiro, and this is specifically for the version 1.2.4. And below that, we see an actual snippet of code that can be used to carry out this attack against this vulnerable version of software. Again, this is all freely available online, and nothing is stopping bad hackers from accessing this website. So when it comes to updating, Apache Shiro is now currently, as we speak, on version 1.7.1, several versions past 1.2.4, but I can virtually guarantee you that someone somewhere in the world is still on 1.2.4, and so they're vulnerable to this type of attack. Updating your software doesn't just add fun new features and trinkets that you as a user can see and enjoy, it also updates the backend security of the software to disallow known attacks like this. Now, the next slide is another example of a very similar site that was designed for cybersecurity researchers that houses a lot of vulnerability information. This is just another example to show the breadth of information that's available online. And, most common business applications will have a scheduled recurring check to see if there are any updates available, and they'll tell you when that's the case. And your operating system, which I assume for most small business users is going to be Windows or Mac, your operating system has a similar notification letting you know that your operating system is ready for updates. And trust me, it's really easy, I know, to see a notification pop up about updates and say, oh, I'll get to it later. But it's actually incredibly important to avoid these types of hacks. Now, when it comes to antivirus specifically, the importance is twofold. Now, first off, patching antivirus does the same thing that I just talked about. It plugs the holes, the known holes up in the security of the antivirus software, but it also makes the antivirus software more effective. Most antiviruses are what are called signature-based, which means they have a hard-coded database of bad viruses to look for and watch out for. And when something tries to come in, it checks against that database. So in this image on the right of the image, it looks like we're in the matrix here, but it says a dictionary file, and that's just the antivirus's database of bad viruses that I was talking about earlier. On the left side of the image, you see an executable file of ones and zeros that's trying to run, and you see the little arrow there that says, hey, I found this particular order of ones and zeros that I've detected, and it matches against this virus. We need to quarantine this executable or completely delete it and take that threat away. So that's how antiviruses work. And when you update your antivirus version, you're not only plugging the holes in the antivirus itself, but you're also keeping this known database of viruses up to date so that you can detect the newest hacks and attacks that could be impacting your system. Now, Mehrdad spoke earlier about using a VPN when on public Wi-Fi, and we spoke a little bit about that. I'm going to show a quick example of why, especially on public Wi-Fis, VPNs can be critical to securing your data. This is what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. And let's say you're at a Starbucks where, a lot of big business deals go down. You're at a Starbucks, you've got your laptop. Let's say you were on the road and you remembered, oh man, I have to do this last minute, HR thing or employee management or even banking. And you log into the Starbucks Wi-Fi. By default, without any added protections, anyone else on that same Wi-Fi connection can easily grab your data out of the air, read it, well, not physically, but grab it out, read it, and send it back on its way as if nothing ever happened. Hence the name man in the middle, because he's just in the middle between you and your connection with the internet. Now, on the next slide, we see a VPN protecting against this. At the bottom of the slide, we see, again, the unprotected internet connection. There's just the laptop, the little unlocked symbol going to the internet, going out to the website and coming back, all very, very unprotected. And here's where the man-in-the-middle attack can occur. At the top of the slide, we've added in two separate items here. We've added the VPN client, which looks like the shield, and the VPN server, which looks like the little sort of desktop tower. The VPN client is a piece of software on your machine, and what it does is it encrypts or locks your data before it even ever leaves your computer. The person sitting behind you at the Starbucks, then, if they try to grab your data out of the air, they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, this doesn't make sense. It's gobbledygook. It's completely not readable. And once your data has made it out towards the wider internet, then, it interacts with the VPN company's server, which then says, okay, this data is from one of our customers, and I'll unlock it and send it along its way to whatever website that it was, intended for. What you'll also notice is that the errors are bidirectional, which means that the data that the website or server sends back to you is also encrypted and cannot be grabbed by the notorious Starbucks hacker. So moving on from the technology side of attacks, we do have the social engineering section, often called human hacking. And any good social engineering attack starts with good reconnaissance. So be mindful about what you post online. My parents used to tell me that all the time when Facebook first came out. But you really have to think about it in terms of your business as well. So here are several types of social engineering attacks. Mehrdad did cover the phishing, spear phishing, and whaling, but there's also vishing, which is voice phishing. It's like phone calls. There's smishing as well, which is SMS phishing. So, sending you links via text message. Pretexting is also called impersonation, and it's when someone sort of contacts you claiming to be someone in a position of power. Like, hypothetically, if someone reached out to me claiming to be my boss's boss, and they said they had an important meeting coming up, but they couldn't reach my boss. So I need to give over some sort of like quarterly data or something that they need for the meeting. Very, very important. And this is a good example of where reconnaissance is important, because if they can rattle off the names of my boss and his boss and maybe the project that I'm working on, it immediately becomes a lot more convincing to me that they are who they say they are, and I'm more likely to fall for their tricks because they have that sort of personalized information. So again, be very aware of what you post online and what you are freely putting out for the world and potentially malicious hackers to see. Baiting is very simply leaving out or giving out little items that take advantage of the target's curiosity. It can be as simple as leaving a little USB outside a house or workplace on the ground, or giving USBs away at a trade show. Now, if you were to see this USB, you may think, yep, that's a USB. And you may even want to plug it into your computer to find out who it belongs to. But if we look on the inside of this device here, we see it's actually controlled by a little SD card on the inside. This SD card can be programmed with viruses and ransomware and other spyware and attacks to where when somebody plugs this into their computer, it runs thousands of commands, in the blink of an eye. And so if you find this on the ground outside of your work, you're trying to be a good person to find who it belongs to, you plug it into your laptop, boom, your data is encrypted or locked, or somebody else has it, but you don't know. So they're just sort of snooping in on the data on your network. Tailgating and piggybacking apply less to small businesses because you're often working from home, but the premise is that if a building requires access like a card reader and I want to get in, all I have to do is wait outside pretending to be on the phone, and when a legitimate user comes up and unlocks the door, I kind of zoop in behind them, and now I have access where I shouldn't. Quid pro quo is Latin for this for that, or essentially a favor for a favor, and it's essentially when someone offers a trade. It can be as simple as, I'll give you $10,000 for your work login credentials, and money hits a lot of people, incredibly emotionally, and $10,000 can change your life. So my login credentials, $10,000 is worth it? Probably not, but that's how they can try to get your credentials. Now, moving on to an often overlooked aspect of cybersecurity, and it's actually kind of my favorite one, is physical security. Going right into the first example here, let's say right behind these doors is a reception desk that maybe the receptionist leaves unlocked overnight. And if someone can get access to that computer physically, they then have access to the network. Even if the computer is locked, if they have physical access, they can plug in something like this little USB, it's called a rubber ducky actually, like I showed earlier, to introduce malware to the system. Many business storefronts have a similar double door setup like this, sometimes even the frameless glass doors, and by the very nature of both doors opening either individually or in tandem, they're not really well fit to each other. There's always going to be some form of gap, and usually there's some weather stripping in there to maintain the indoor climate and not rack up energy bills, but weather stripping is not a security feature. And if we go to the next slide, we see that these doors are most often locked from the outside with a key or from the inside with a little thumb turn flipper. This is one of my favorite little toys here. There's this item right here, which you can insert in through the weather stripping between the doors, turn it to its side, put this little hook over the thumb turn flipper, and there's a braided cable throughout here that when you turn this knob, whoop, it unlocks the door from the outside if you don't have the key. So again, weather stripping is not a feature. There are ways that you can get around that, like panels that can be put on the door to cover the gap. But as fun of an example as this is, and as much as I enjoy my little tool set that I have here, and I've got many more tools, physical security is more than just stopping bad hackers from getting in. It's also about protecting accidents from ruining your assets or data. Now, if any of you have small children, or perhaps cats or dogs, there's always a possibility that they knock a glass of water onto your work computer, or knock the computer itself off the desk and cause it to crash to the ground and get demolished. Mehrdad spoke previously about the importance of having backups of your data, and accidents like this are a big reason why having a backup is important, either on the cloud or in a separate, external hard drive. As important as it is to have a backup, though, it's equally important, or perhaps more important, to prevent these incidents from happening in the first place. And it can be as simple as locking your laptop in a desk drawer whenever you're not using it, so a cat can't come by and swipe it off the table. And it sounds like a almost laughably simple solution, like just put it in a drawer. but it actually can prevent potentially harmful data loss and time and resources spent trying to get any of this data back. Now, the last slide that I have for you is that cybersecurity lifecycle that I mentioned earlier. This is from NIST that James mentioned, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And their link to this framework is actually in the bottom left of this slide. Like Raman said, the slides will be going out, and this is fully clickable. You can go read up about it. And we'll start on the top left, which is the identify step. Here, you're going to identify what assets you need to protect to include soft and hard assets. Soft meaning data, client data, stuff like that. Hard assets being your laptop or, potentially a server or something if you have a web server. But you also need to identify for each of those assets the threats that potentially exist against your data, against the hard assets that you have. Moving clockwise, we have the protect step, which is where you take your information from the prior phase and put into place security measures like antivirus or a firewall or having a backup of your data. Basically anything you can do to protect your assets against those threats that you identified could, impact them. Keeping in mind, again, the triangle of balance between security, functionality, and user-friendliness. You don't want to go too hard on security. You don't want to go too soft on security. It's very different for every business. We'll have some resources later linked to where you can sort of go through and read about setting up a security posture that's proper for your business. Next, we have the detect step, which is where you're monitoring for potential intrusions or data theft, etc. This can be done with the antivirus or firewalls that you set up in the protect step, or potentially even yourself, noticing the performance of your computer being bogged down, things are going really slowly out of nowhere seemingly. And once you detect or suspect that there's been an attack, the next step is to respond. That's the next one in the cycle here. For bigger businesses, they have full dedicated incident response teams, but for smaller businesses, this can be very, very simple as calling up the Geek Squad and having them scan your computer for ransomware or whatever it may be that's impacting your system. Part of the reason that we're all here is because not everybody has years of cyber experience that I'm trying to fit into 15 minutes of forum. So calling experts like the Geek Squad if you suspect something is wrong is a great step to go through this respond part of the NIST framework. And finally, we have the step to recover. Once the incident has been handled and is no longer an ongoing threat, you can focus on building your business back to where it needs to be. And let's say it was ransomware. Let's say that, somebody somehow got ransomware on your computer, they locked all your data, you don't want to pay the fee, and you lose all of your files. The recovery step here can be as simple as just restoring all of your data from last week's backup. But you cannot back up your data with hindsight. You need to have these types of backups ready before an attack happens. And that's why Mehrdad was stressing the importance of having a backup earlier. The most important thing about this image to take away is to notice that it is indeed a circle. It is a continuous cycle, and you should be on some predefined regularity reassessing your assets and threats and ensuring that all of your protection and detection methods are up to date. And of course, responding and recovering, as needed, hopefully never, hopefully not all that often. But this is a cycle. Cybersecurity isn't a single destination. It is a continuous process to ensure going forward that you're also protected and your data is protected, your clients are protected, stuff like that. Now, the next slide here has some resources. There's a phishing quiz that essentially tests how likely you are to click on some of those sketchy links. The next link is you put in your email address and it tells you if that email address was found on any sites that have been hacked recently. Some of these are kind of cool links, like the last one, Countdown to Zero Day Stuxnet. That's a cool resource to read about cybersecurity, and Stuxnet actually is very interesting because they used a completely remote, piece of malware to physically impact the Iranian nuclear centrifuges. Basically, the software that they were able to put onto the centrifuges caused them to spin at a slightly higher RPM and actually physically destroyed the centrifuges. So that's a way that cybersecurity actually bled into destroying a physical machine. It's just kind of cool. The next slide is more resources. These are the resources I was talking about This is from NIST. You'll see the last 4 of them are actually .gov sites. These are from the government, from CERT, from the Small Business Administration, from the Federal Communications Commission. These are ways and frameworks for you to read through to protect your small business. It's geared towards small businesses. They know you don't necessarily have $5 million of a cybersecurity budget, and you may just need the simplest way to prevent 90% of the attacks. And so that's all that I have for you right now. We can go into the next group discussion, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you, Devin. As you were talking, I was really thankful when you took out the tool that you're an ethical hacker and not an unethical.
Yes, that is very important. The concept of an ethical hacker, just to define that a little bit, is the term hacker itself kind of has a negative connotation, but it really just means someone that tinkers and fiddles with things to the point to where you're making things do what they're not supposed to do. And ethical hackers are hired by their clients to essentially come in and try to break into the system. It's like I'm acting as a malicious hacker, trying to get in, and then telling whatever clientele, like, hey, this is where the holes in your security are. This is how you can patch yourself up better. So
Devin,
that's the ethical hacking part.
Devin, is it fair to say same difference as lockpicker and locksmith?
Oh yeah, yep. I've got a set of those as well, and it is all for ethical purposes. I can guarantee you this.
Excellent, thank you. If anyone has any questions, please raise hand in Zoom. And let me see. It looks like we might have someone. Thomas, you can unmute and ask your question or share your comment.
Okay. I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah, I had two questions. One, when Devin, when you were talking about the VPN, it was showing that the data was encrypted on both ends by either the server or the client software on the PC. It seems like today most websites, like banks or shopping or things, use HTTPS, which is a secure encrypted end-to-end, so that if you were at least paying attention to that was enabled on your connection to, say, your bank or your company, would that be just as secure as a VPN?
So the intrusion, or not intrusion, that kind of has a bad connotation. The implementation of HTTPS into the technological world was very good. It does provide extra layers of security. There are ways to get around HTTPS, especially in that Starbucks example. If somebody is physically in the same area with you, on the same Wi-Fi network with you, there are, I can, let's see, I'll bring up a different example here and talk about a rogue access point. And a rogue access point is essentially, let's say that person at Starbucks behind you wearing the hoodie and dark glasses inside for some reason, they really want your data. And one way that could be used to get around HTTPS is to set up their own access point, and they may name it the exact same thing as Starbucks Wi-Fi 1. And if your computer connects to Starbucks Wi-Fi 1, and you're accidentally connecting to the malicious hacker's rogue access point instead of the actual access point, they can control what information goes through there a little bit better than they can just by getting it out of the air and sending it back up to the same access point. There are ways around HTTPS. There's a concept in cybersecurity called defense in depth, DPTH, depth. And this is essentially having multiple barriers between you and the threat. You don't just want, here's me, here's the threat, here's HTTPS, because if they find a way through HTTPS, they've got you. If you have HTTPS and a VPN, if they get through HTTPS, they hit the VPN and they're like, okay, great, I have to go through this next thing. So defense in depth is it's a big aspect of cybersecurity, and it's essentially just layering models of threat mitigation on top of each other to prevent attacks from likely succeeding. And so you can use HTTPS, and it provides a decent amount of security, but if you add in extra layers of security, you're protecting yourself that much more.
Okay, thank you. That was a good answer.
Thank you.
I had one other question. It's not exactly security, but it does get back to protecting small and medium-sized, maybe even large businesses. Most small businesses, for example, have a dedicated connection coming in for their Wi-Fi in their building and their users, usually through maybe a cable connection or some other dedicated access. And when that connection, for whatever reason, fails, some companies are providing digital switched backup using 4G LTE, which can, roughly run at up to as high as 10 megabits, and also 5G, which obviously goes 20 times faster than that. So in some cases with 5G, they could almost approximate their bandwidth throughput capability as fast on 5G as they could on their regular connection. So my question is this something that you're familiar with, people using? I noticed most recently down in Florida where we have Comcast, Comcast is now actually advertising that feature on commercials for being able to offer a backup scenario, which seems to make some sense. What do you think?
Yeah, so there's this concept in security along with defense in depth, and not to add in another triangle, but there's the CIA triad, and it's not the Central Intelligence Agency. It is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when it comes to cybersecurity, you're trying to protect all of these things, and I'll go through quick definitions of each one. Confidentiality is essentially making sure that guy in Starbucks can't read your data. It's making sure that you or anyone that you designate are the only ones able to access that data. Integrity is making sure that data, when it gets to whatever its destination is the exact same, to prevent somebody from taking it out of the air, changing a few of the ones and zeros, and sending it out. And the person that receives it thinks that it's the correct data, but it's actually different from what you intended to send. That's the I, that's the integrity of the data. And A for availability is essentially uptime. And, banking institutions need to have a high availability, because if people can't access their money, then the world goes to chaos. But other businesses don't necessarily need high availability. They focus more on, I need to put more of my resources towards the confidentiality side of things. And similar to my previous triangle, the closer you go towards one of these vertices of the CIA triad, the farther you kind of stray from the other ones. So having high availability as a requirement very much depends on your business, the data that you handle, your clients. It seems like a good option. There are ways to hack in through 4G and 5G and stuff like that, but there's also ways to hack into anything else. So, it's never going to be a perfectly secure scenario. But if your business is very dependent on having a high uptime of availability to its customers, I think it's a reasonable way, so long as you have other protections in place like firewalls, like antivirus, stuff like that. It's a reasonable way to provide that availability to your customers, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know there's we can talk all afternoon about high availability solutions and everything else. I know that's an interesting area, but thank you, Thomas. That was a great question, and Devin for handling it. So we have got a couple questions in the Q&A box. One is actually from James O'Brien, pretty interesting. It's for Devin. If I developed a new approach to cybersecurity, where would I go to get it tested to see how well it works?
Well, I guess this depends on what you mean by approach to cybersecurity. If it's a new cyber tool or technique, I think that there are resources and companies and maybe even government resources that may be willing to spend some of their resources to help you, develop this. And it's kind of important to make sure your data is your own. If this is a cybersecurity approach that you think could actually impact the whole world someday, maybe write up a quick patent for it or something before you give it to a company. But it really depends on what category of cybersecurity approach you're going for. If it's more of a mindset, like a framework, if you're going to change the NIST framework cycle that I was talking about, that's more of a sort of mind test almost. Like it's hypothetical and it's less physically testing something. But if it is physically testing cyber attacks or cyber protections, I would likely think that going to one of these cybersecurity businesses like FireEye would be the best way to utilize their resources to try to find out if it works. I don't know if that answers your question. It was a little bit broad, but I think that I covered as much as I could there.
Okay.
Let me take a slightly different view into that question. This is no different than, so it's not about tools, it's not about technology, it comes down to business. So putting my score hat on, look at it as a business. So you're developing a product and you're going to the market. Doesn't matter. So forget about the security, don't forget about the new approaches. You're talking about a new product, right? New service. So what's your business plan? Who's your customer? Who are you gonna sell this to? And what kind of market is there? So you need to establish that base, basically,
Yeah, and James did put in another Q&A. He said he already patented it, and he's talking about the de-identification of the digital packetization process. That's a lot of very in-depth technical stuff that's going on here. I still think that, taking this concept to one of the security research companies, and it's more than just FireEye, but that's the one that keeps coming to mind right now. I think that taking it to them and, patenting is good, but making sure that you have sort of a contract with them almost to say like, hey, I'm just here to test this. This is my content, stuff like that. I think that still going to one of those larger sort of companies would be the best way to test it to see if it really works.
Guys, I think this is going too deep for the purpose of the discussion. I apologize, James. We can't keep going with this. You probably should. It is interesting. It is about both what Devin said from a technology perspective and what Mehrdad said from a business perspective. And I hope you have something there that's going to change the world, because as these guys have shared, there's going to be new threats every day, and we're going to need people like you to combat those threats. So this is excellent. I do want to address Ken. Ken asked the question. I don't know if either of you read it in the Q&A.
I did, yes. So Ken said, we use a third-party tech partner for our operations and payments. What are some key issues we should be aware of as it relates to our risk exposure related to breaches on our partner's platform related to our customers' accounts? Mehrdad was speaking previously about some of the compliances and legal things that you have to keep in mind. So if this has anything to do with payments, like you're saying, there's something called the PCI, payment card industry, and any company that deals with taking customers' payment data and processing it and essentially taking their money has to comply with PCI compliance and rules. Your third-party tech partner should, have information freely available to you about how they secure their systems, but they should also have, my suspicion is that they would have that. They'd have information, not necessarily technically detailed about how they secure it, because if they give that to you, you can break it. But they should give you general, broad strokes of, hey, this is how we're protecting our client data. But they should also have, I would essentially say, cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is a big thing that's actually coming around. And what that should do is, your contract with that third-party company, essentially, if the contract is written properly, should take any of the blame off of you. That should be entirely on the third-party company. If they're breached and your client's data is exposed, your client cannot sue you or your company. They would have to go to that third-party company. And that third-party company likely has some form of cyber insurance, because cyber attacks, that's what this whole thing is about. Cyber attacks are a big thing, big thing nowadays. And cyber insurance essentially pays out for, legal fees or customer lawsuits, stuff like that. So my assumption is that they would have those types of things set up.
And you may also want to, Ken, you may also want to look at the NIST controls. I believe they're like 14 or 17, I can't recall, 17 family of controls. And in your industry, I don't know what industry you're in, but I'm very familiar with healthcare. For instance, there's HIPAA, there's SOC 2. So you have to look at what are the standards in your industry and whether that vendor, the third-party partner, is complying with those standards. So that should be fairly easy to look in your industry and pick up those standards and see whether that partner is adhering to the controls that they're, need to take care of those.
Guys, let's take one last question. I know we are a half hour over. Thomas has his hand raised. If we can address that quickly. That would
real quick, I think Ken has a follow-up question. He said, what was that term you used again? I'm not sure what term you're talking about here, but there's a lot of regulatory compliance that Mehrdad was just talking about, like the SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, like HIPAA, HIPAA, Health Information Protection something AA. It's basically for healthcare, making sure that client data is not exposed. And there's the PCI, which is the payment card industry. And essentially what Mehrdad and I were saying is that this third party that is offering these services to you, you should follow, you should ensure that they're compliant with all of the regulations that are on whatever industry you're in. So if you are in the healthcare industry, you are bound by HIPAA compliance, and you need to ensure that this third-party company is HIPAA compliant in their security posture. There are many resources online, government resources, like the NIST, I believe, is what Mehrdad was talking about. That's, again, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST gives forth security controls and has a lot of information about these types of regulatory compliance that apply to different industries like healthcare or retail, stuff like that. Cool.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Guys, we have, let's wrap up in about 30 seconds. Thomas, your question, please.
Yeah, I was going to ask Devin if he, there's companies like FireEye and PhishTech and that provide managed security services, but generally they're offering it to large businesses and government organizations that have deep pockets. The small business owner that might be 10 employees or 20 or whatever, is there any type of, that you know of managed security service that would be affordable for those size companies?
I think that, so it takes a decent amount of overhead and effort to go into somebody else's company and set things up for them for success. And my assumption is that most options you're going to find are going to be those bigger companies. I personally haven't looked around for more small business friendly ones. I can't give any suggestions for any particular companies about that. My suspicion is that there are probably some, but the vast majority of what you're going to find is the higher end, deeper pockets, as you're talking about, that type of stuff. That's my assumption, is that the majority are going to.
Do you have any suggestions? Because I know you're a small business owner yourself.
Yes, if I may jump in. Yes, those big companies like FireEye and others, they do have resellers that they cater to small businesses. In fact, I don't know what region you're in. I do know a reseller of FireEye down in Minnesota. They do work specifically with small businesses. So depending on where you are, again, we can help you find some of those. But yeah, there are even smaller companies that are not even affiliated with these, conglomerates. So yes, there are opportunities because, again, security is not just confined to big corporations. It's all over the place, and there are a lot of businesses that cater to small businesses when it comes to security.
Exactly. And Anne is suggesting correctly, try checking local cyber communities That helps.
Yeah, if I know what region you're in, I can do a quick search and probably come up with at least a couple in your neck of the woods. But nowadays, it really doesn't need to be physically near to your location. It really can be anywhere. So we can certainly help you a little bit on that.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you, Thomas. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, let's wrap up. Wow, this has been a great discussion, and I know we ran out of time about a half hour ago, but listen, this is the lively discussion we were hoping to have. Hopefully you got a lot out of it, gained the knowledge, and as you leverage technology to grow your business, you're aware of these security topics. So we want to thank you for the time you spent with us. Next time we'll schedule 2 hours for, or maybe more, for cybersecurity. Obviously, there's a tremendous need to be aware and get educated on it for all of us. So I want to thank you, our presenters. Mehrdad and Devin have done a tremendous amount of work to get ready for today, and we're fortunate to have their expertise with us. So thank you. And I want to thank you, those of you that attended the entire time, and I know some folks have dropped. It's a pleasure to have you here and hear about how you are going to use this information to grow your business. So I hope you have a great afternoon, great day, and an excellent weekend. Take care.